Good evening, Holliston. Welcome to the Select Board's meeting for Wednesday, September 9th, 2020. We're meeting this week as a result of the long holiday weekend. I hope everybody enjoyed it. This evening we have an agenda that will start with executive session. We will be in executive session for approximately 15 to 20 minutes and then rejoin this meeting. So at this time I'd ask my colleagues, I'll entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purposes of discussing collective bargaining strategy with the police union, where discussion in open session could detrimentally impact bargaining. As I mentioned, we will be continuing our agenda in open session when we conclude executive session. I'll entertain a motion.
Move to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing a union contract.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor, please raise your hand. Aye?
Aye.
Aye. That carries our
roll call vote, sorry.
roll call.
Yep.
Tina?
Aye.
John? Aye. Ben?
Aye.
Thank you.
Very good. So we are now in executive session. We'll rejoin in about 15 to 20 minutes. Thank you. Good evening, Holliston. The Select Board has re-adjourned to a regular session. We've concluded our executive session. Thank you for joining us this evening. We have an agenda which, as always these days, starts with a coronavirus community update featuring our police chief and emergency management director, Chief Cassidy. Chief, if you'd like to join us, I would respectfully ask for your update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to announce that as of approximately 6 p.m. this evening, the Massachusetts Department of Public Health updated their community-level risk categories for the Commonwealth, and we were able to return back to the green, which is the low-risk category. We had been in the yellow moderate risk last week, but fortunately we have gone back to the green, which is a very good place for us to be. Our current count of cases, according to our local data, is 74 cases. We had 3 additional cases which recently recovered, and with the 2 previous COVID-related fatalities, that brings us down to only 4 active cases as of last night. Been spending a lot of time working with town departments, especially the schools, making sure that everyone has the resources that they need, the PPE, the sanitizing equipment. I've been doing some coordination and some consulting with individual school buildings with regards to directional travel inside the building, where they should be putting decals, occupancy of rooms, and just making sure that we are all set to do a safe in-person opening, hopefully starting next week.
In terms of preparation, can you tell us a little bit about the work you've been doing with the schools, specifically the elementary, middle, and high school, to ready them, and what type of resources are going to be at play for parents and students to experience on day one?
Sure. So I've been working with the business manager, the interim superintendent, and the building level principals, also with the head nurse, Lynn Bowler, to make sure that as they prepared their district level plans and then they prepared their individual school level plans, that it conformed not only to the guidelines from DESE, but also made sure that we weren't going to be violating any fire prevention regulations, because there are some things which could possibly pose a little bit of a conflict. For instance, a door that they want to remain pegged open so that they don't have a lot of people touching the crash bar. If that's in an exit discharge, that could cause problems with regards to smoke propagation if there were a fire. So a lot of technical advice in that regard. Looking at occupancy flow with regards to one-way hallways, stairwells, making sure that we're not going to overcrowd, to ensure a safe flow of bodies inside the building.
In terms of day-to-day management of the school environment, Chief, I presume the schools are adequately handling their janitorial staff, professional staff, to understand what has to happen for preventative instances, and also in the event that they get any presumptive or positives. Is the drill kind of well known at this point? Are they working on a model that is at this point well advertised? Do people understand what to do on day one?
Yes, they've done a great job of putting not only their plan that they submitted to DESE, but also they have a supplemental approximately 24 to 25 page safety plan, which they've published on their website under the reopening tab, so that all of the parents and the community can see exactly what the staff sees in terms of this is how they would handle a presumptive case, this is how they would handle a positive case, the notification that would happen. They'd be coordinating with the local Board of Health. So yeah, their information is transparent. It's out there. It's available. I've reviewed things. I've had conversations while stuff was still in draft phase, specifically some of the policies that they had to adopt that are part of that safety plan.
And my final question is, we've gone through this on a smaller scale with reopening municipal buildings and so forth. I think we had some lessons learned there where there's a mixture of anxiety and sort of real-world applications, and I'm sure you're going to encounter a lot of that, or the schools will, on opening. Do you plan to be on site during the first several days that schools are opening to provide guidance and information? I
will continue to be available to our school partners, absolutely.
Yeah. Sounds like they've done their homework.
They absolutely have. They've put a lot of time and effort into this, and I know that it's being done with great intentionality for the safety of everyone involved.
Mr. Sparrow, any questions on that matter?
Not on that matter.
Ms. Tina?
Since we're talking about schools and the mandate for public school children to have a flu vaccine, do you know the dates of the Board of Health flu clinics?
Those have not been released to me yet.
Do we anticipate more than one this year before December 31st?
Yes, my understanding from speaking with our Board of Health partners was that they would try to have several, and it would be sector-specific, so to try and minimize the exchange between the regular population and some of the older population. They're going to try and have one specifically at the senior center,
Okay.
so that folks who might be in a higher risk category aren't mixing with some of the younger generations, and then they would have one for general population, and they're talking about having one for the younger folks as well.
Okay. And then the second one, through your calls that you've been on for either CDC or DPH or some combination, have you come across, seen, heard of guidelines or recommendations for school building managers or facilities managers for schools on HVAC systems?
Yes. Every
Okay.
time that is raised on a DPH call, DESE is very quick to indicate that an individual school facilities professional should consult with their local Board of Health and that they should be following CDC guidelines and ASHRAE standards.
Okay. Has that work been done for our school public buildings?
Yeah, the business manager was able to have an outside consultant come in, and they did an analysis of all four of the school buildings.
And can I just ask about when that was done?
It's already been posted to Munis, so
Okay.
I want to say probably within the last 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. And if there were any red flags or I don't know, I'm being presumptuous here, but if there were any, are there any is there any work that you're aware of that's being done before the start of school, once school started, or no work at all? Like, where are we in terms of being ready with our HVAC systems for the return of students to the schools?
So right now, a lot of what we're doing is the introduction of ambient air through the windows.
Yep, okay.
Is the primary way. I know they looked at exchanging some filters for
Okay.
some of the HVAC equipment, but they did not make a supplemental request to me to bring to you
Yeah.
based on any overarching findings of all four buildings.
Do you know what
Okay.
filters they're planning to go to?
I believe it was some higher grade HEPA that they were looking at in some areas.
Standard from the state level is MERV 13.
Okay.
And this, if were to be necessary, this would be a request that would come through the CARES because it's one of the eligible expenses.
It is an eligible expense,
Sure.
yes,
Okay.
very much so.
All right. Thank you. That's it.
All right. Mike, if we want to go on to the programmatic side of our agenda this evening,
Yes,
regarding coronavirus
I
updates.
have one department level request for you this evening. It's from the Youth and Family Services in the amount of $380. And this would be under the accelerated telework capacity category, which the breakdown of that is 100% CARES eligible, 0% FEMA. And this would be to support the staff at Youth and Family Services doing their telehealth appointments. It's a combination of call appearance and dual voicemails. And so basically, the dual voicemails is so that the support staff can share a common device, but have separate voicemails. And then the call appearance is so that when a staff member is doing a telehealth appointment with a client, it's appearing to show the number for the department as opposed to the individual's personal cell phone that they would be using. So that's for their protection.
What's
So
the amount of money, Mike?
$380. And this comes with the approval and backing of the Youth Advisory Council.
So just a quick question on that. We are buying a service that goes beyond the CARES Act effective funding. That's okay with you?
Yes, and the Youth and Family Services Director understands that she would need to absorb the difference of the cost in subsequent, past December 30th. And she'd be able to absorb it into her regular budget.
Okay. Any questions, Ben?
No, she seems pretty straightforward.
Well, that is my question. But we don't have to get into it this evening, but those costs that go beyond, those yearly subscription type costs that go beyond the 31st of December, what is the plan? I understand she's being instructed to pull it out of her budget. She had a 0% budget like everybody else, so I'm imagining that not a huge sum of money that we're talking about, but I was trying to remember if this is our only yearly subscription that was purchased for COVID that is going to extend beyond December 31st. I feel like there were a couple other ones out there.
She also had the telehealth
Right.
subscription to be able to support their appointments.
But outside of Youth and Family Services, I thought that there might be a few others. Maybe I'm wrong. But anyway,
Yeah,
at some
I can
point,
think of at least one other.
Okay. You know, how do we absorb that?
Right. And
After-
clearly she's put thought into the fact that she thinks she can absorb it going up
She
beyond
does think
December
she can,
31st,
okay.
and she feels very strongly that this is, and this was, just to give Chris Mayo credit, you know, he worked through a lot of different options
Yeah.
to try to get her what she needs, in the fact that so many of these telehealth things are coming up, and cell phones are a more costly alternative than this plan, which is to work with their cell phones, but provide them the security that they need, as the chief detailed. So a lot of work went into this. This was kind of a compromise and a cost-effective compromise.
While also maintaining the safety of the employees.
Yes.
Any other thoughts, Tina?
None, thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to approve the requested $380 for the Youth and Family Services, what shall we call it, the call appearance feature, Mike?
I would say the telehealth capacity.
Very well.
Move to approve $380 for improved telehealth capacity for Youth and Family Services under the CARES Act.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
It carries, Mike.
Great. And that's it for department requests. Just two other items. Obviously, it's great that we got back into the green. Just a reminder programmatically that everyone should be washing their hands, keeping their distance, wearing their face coverings, and avoiding large groups. And then lastly, I know that tomorrow the town administrator will be posting the agenda for next week's meeting. I was wondering if we could change the order, and if I could come at the end of your meeting instead of at the beginning.
No objection.
I can do that.
Okay, thank you. I've not been able to do officer training with my
Absolutely.
my leadership since January, and I would like the opportunity to train with them before I come with you.
No worries.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I have for this evening.
One quick piece of follow-up. I noticed in your update to us yesterday that you received further guidance from A&F on the reporting.
Yes.
Briefly talk about that, could you?
Sure. So right now, the guidance is that it's the original grantees that are required to report to the federal government. And although the sub-grantees, which is what we are, because the money came to us through A&F, are not required to report, they recognize that all of a sudden that reporting requirement could come in for sub-grantees, so they are asking us to do the report as if we needed to support to the
In
feds.
an Excel file, correct?
Yeah.
Yes. And they provided an Excel spreadsheet that's interactive, that has all of the appropriate guidance, and it's not a heavy lift to be able to comply.
The first quarterly report, I think, for the period ending June 30th is due at the end of this month.
September
correct?
25th,
Okay.
yes, the last Friday of this month.
Likely see that in an upcoming meeting.
Absolutely.
Will you, on your reporting for how money's been spent to date, will you start identifying contracts, grants, loans, transfers, direct payments on there for the reporting purposes?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You good?
And just also to that point, just to make sure that we have in that report what has already been reported in, because I mean, a lot of it isn't, I don't think there's too much date specific. It's a lot of it, the report that we get from.
The report that you get is by fiscal year,
Yeah,
so you have through June 30th, and then you have after,
right.
but
Oh, that piece, yes, would be separated.
And in this report, it's only FY20.
Right.
correct, yes.
Got it.
It is March 1st, 2020 through June 30, 2020 spending is due by 4 p.m. Friday, September 25th, and they've now set up the online web portal.
Okay.
Chief, thanks so much for your update.
Absolutely.
Appreciate all
Thank
your
you.
hard work.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All
Of
right.
course.
All right. Moving on to warrants. Mr. Sparrow, what do you have for us?
We have one warrant. I'll make a motion to approve the warrant for $492,204.06. Of that, $169,136.88 is town payroll.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
That carries. Thank you, Ben. Public comment, Mr. Sparrow.
It's me again. Just quickly, we actually signed it yesterday. Quickly, just wanted to say thank you to everyone who volunteered for the election last week, as we haven't had it's been a few days since our last meeting. So I just wanted to say thank you to the town clerk and to all the volunteers and to everybody who put in a lot of effort to make that happen and to count the ballots and to get everything accomplished. So I think voting is very important, and it's good to see people still coming out to participate and to help the town to be able to meet our responsibilities as citizens. So thank you to those people.
Thanks,
That's all I
Ben.
have.
Tina?
No public comment tonight, thank you.
I would second Ben's comment. Just looking ahead, the task of the town clerk tackling the mail-in ballot initiative is going to amplify a bit for the national election coming up in November. The work that they did to prepare for the primaries was extraordinary, and I think the Secretary of State noted that a lot of this new law is falling on local communities as they try to work out the kinks. So we'd be remiss to, again, not to underline the hard work that they did to achieve a very favorable outcome. I think Holliston voted quite well, and it shows. So thanks again to their staff. So thank you, Ben, for noting that as well. Just a reminder, folks, we've been monitoring conditions up at Pinecrest Golf Course over the last several months. The town has taken some time to put up some signage to direct users of that recreational facility and the restaurant to park accordingly. There have been some instances where people are abusing that, parking on the grass, destroying irrigation infrastructure and so forth. The town intends to aggressively police that area and hold patrons to designated parking areas. So through this brief announcement, work with us, please abide by the parking rules, and treat the land as though it's your own, because it is. So thank you very much. So that is it for public comment. Let's move on to our town administrator. Travis, any comments, updates? Oh, excuse me, I got somebody on here. Anne-Marie Dorning, I think, has a comment. Hello, how are you tonight?
All right, so 9 Timberledge Drive, I just had a quick comment that I would love to make to all of you if there's time.
Please, no, absolutely, go ahead.
Perfect. So congratulations, we're green again, that's great. But my comment actually relates to that. So I live in Holliston, I drive by the Holliston Historical Society, virtually every day. And this past weekend I noticed there were a number of weddings there. One, certainly, possibly two. And unfortunately, as driving by, I noticed that there was, so the guests were not wearing masks and they were not socially distancing. I noticed at one point the bartenders seemed to be wearing masks, but other than that, virtually nobody else. So my question is, my comment is, what are we doing with the contracts of the Holliston Historical Society to make sure that the guests and the people who sign the contracts are following all current public health guidelines? And is there any sort of enforcement of that? And the only other thing I would say is that I think we've all heard the stories about the super spreader event in Maine. 3 people are dead because of a wedding that was held there. Obviously, nobody expected or wanted that, but nevertheless, protocols were not followed, and that was the result. So I just wanted to mention that I had observed that at the Historical Society this past weekend.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dorning, for bringing that to our attention. I'd ask Chief Cassidy if he has any comments about that public event and what is a public property to some extent, what we can expect.
Right, so that's a private property. It's not a municipal resource. So as a private event, we don't have access to their contracts. I have had great lines of communication with the Historical Society during this pandemic. They've run different events by me and whether or not they would be allowed based on the phase and the step that we were in. So I can absolutely follow up with the observations that she has made and remind them of what the requirements are. And if we find that there is continued non-compliance, there are ways that can be enforced locally as well as at the state level.
I think Ms. Dorning brings up an interesting point. In this case, if it's private property, if you decide to have a gathering within a certain number that's compliant with the state guidelines, you would like to think the participants would exercise good judgment. In her observation, they did not.
Right.
I think her follow-up question is on the enforcement side. If you observe a private party having this kind of an activity without proper social distancing, mask wearing, what have you, is there an enforcement area for us, in this case, to undertake?
Sure. So the executive order, the way it's written, it is enforceable by the local Board of Health, the local police, and the state police. And normally what happens for a local Board of Health to be able to issue fines related to noncompliance, they would need to see a police report. So the first step, if someone has a concern about a gathering that doesn't meet the guidelines, then they should probably call the police, because they're a response agency and equipped. Obviously, on a long weekend, the Board of Health is not in a position to be able to send their agent or any member of their board down to make observations. And so if there is a police report, then that is actionable. On one of the DPH calls that I was on, I think it was yesterday, a local Board of Health member started to raise a question to the DPH, and their first question was, is there a police report? And the response from the Board of Health, the local Board of Health agent on that call, was, yes, there was. And so that, again, is the threshold that they need to be able to put out fines.
Ms. Dorning, was that response helpful to you?
Yeah, no, it was. I wanted to bring it to your attention. I had actually thought the Historical Society was owned by the town, but perhaps I'm wrong in that, and I just wanted to make you aware so that...
That's okay, I did too.
I
think it was at one point.
I am happy to follow up on it, and as I said, I've had great lines of communication with the caretakers there, and they've been very responsive and have sought out my guidance frequently.
I have a question.
What?
Go ahead.
Sorry?
No, Ms.
No,
Hine, Ms. Hine has a question. Hang on, please. Go ahead.
The police have been called in the past. Over the past 6 months, Holliston police have responded to residents calling in to say they've seen something that they feel is in violation of the orders.
Yes.
Okay. And not to tell tales out of school, but I believe in Milford, there was an incident last week or the week before where the Board of Health actually fined an individual at his or her home holding
Yes.
an event that had over some number of people in violation of the orders. And I do not recall, though, and I'm wondering if your memory would serve here, was it video footage that was provided to the Board of Health, or was it a police report?
It was a police report.
Police
and,
report,
and,
okay.
and those were stacked fines, because
Yeah.
there was both excessive number, and I believe there was also the non-compliance for the face covering, and I believe there was also the not observing the physical distancing. So each one of them stacks on top of the others. You can have one or three or any combination of them.
So to reiterate your point, it's for residents to call with concerns to the police department, so the report's on file, so the Board of Health has something to act on.
Correct.
Okay.
So it does not seem arbitrary or capricious.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing it to our attention.
Thank you so much.
Okay, anything else on our call for public comment this evening? All right, hearing none, we will move on to the town administrator. Go ahead, Matt. Travis?
First thing, this Friday, 9/11 awards will be held out front at 10 a.m. By the Holliston American Legion Post 47. I will be in attendance, Chief Cassidy and Chief Stone. If anybody else is interested, just let me know. 10 a.m. on Friday. The two updates as continuations from last week on grants. We are expecting tomorrow to be the announcement on the shared streets and spaces from the Mass DOT application that we put in. So hopefully tomorrow we will have an announcement to put on the website. And that would come by the end of the day tomorrow is my expectation. On the announcement that we can make now would be DOER's Green Communities Grant has been official for the town. We were expecting that to come in, and I will reference the amounts and the projects that we expect to undertake. For the total amount that was that is being granted to the town is $173,701. That's $70,608 for the Miller Placentino Elementary School LED lighting with controls, $50,000 for the high school weatherization, $19,200 for the police boiler upgrade, which is a natural gas boiler. And then $33,893 for Pinecrest LED lighting with controls. That is the total of $173,701. I would like to recognize the individuals who were part of that grant application, namely Chris Mayo, but additionally input from James Keith Day, Chief Cassidy, and the sustainability coordinator with, again, Chris Mayo consistently being the one to lead the charge on the Green Communities grant application through DOER. $173,701. Very good news.
Mm-hmm.
And do those fully fund, those are fully funding all those projects?
The only project that we're concerned about and we'll be doing due diligence on before moving forward would be the police boiler upgrade. The other ones were full ask and answer. If we want to go ahead on police boiler upgrade, we'll either need to come up with a shortfall between the original quote and what's been granted here, the $19,000, or another option that Chris Mayo and I were discussing would be to go and look at if the quote was high and if we were to go out to bid, if it could be doable within that amount. So the way that this works is we do get the quotes from one vendor who looks at these projects and puts them in, but we do have the option, if we don't get the full ask, to then go out to bid and see if we can get a better price. So that would probably be my first step on that. And if we feel like the ROI on that project is worth us asking for additional funding through town meeting, we can certainly go that route as well. I will point out, as Chris Mayo has pointed out to me quite a bit, my initial response to say, well, is there another project on here that we can sort of smooth that out with? And the answer is that DOER Green Communities does not allow said accounting.
Yeah, that was clearly stated, that was.
Yes, it was. So each amount goes to each of those projects. So we'll be looking at the boiler specifically. The other ones are clearly, the need was answered, and we'll look at that one specifically. More to come as we approach the warrant.
I have two questions. On the Shared Streets and Grants, grant program, Shared Streets and Spaces grant program, excuse me, some level of coordination will be necessary with the Casey's lot work being done.
If we were to be awarded on the Front Street application.
Yep, okay, all right. And then on the terms of the boiler, so can you just, we've heard a lot about Dude Solutions, the software program the facilities manager is going to use, the benefit of the facilities manager. This is that benefit playing out, correct? Where we knew to identify through the Green Communities grant program this boiler request.
So part of the Green Community is always an audit where they come in, they look at where we can find efficiencies.
Okay.
The problem and the reason that we didn't get the full ask on this one is that due to the age of the boiler and the savings, the ROI doesn't really match the total program. So what they would be covering is the ROI that they would expect to see on something like this. So if we were to want to pursue it, we would have to pony up some, potentially the town. That's how this is designed. Now again, if we could get a better deal than was originally quoted, we may be able to make it up that way.
Okay.
But that's how it's based. It's based on the ROI of these projects for the town to sort of reach the green goals.
So in this case, the boiler work was identified through an audit by the Green Community and folks?
That's my understanding.
Okay, all right, thank you.
All right, Travis, anything else?
Yes, so I would just update you on an original task that I was given when I came in, which is to get department head contracts settled, as they are all lapsed as of 7/1. And so I was just going to update you on where I stand with that. Quite a bit of legwork has gone into that. I just didn't want you to think that I had dropped that task. And so I would just go over briefly sort of
Please go right ahead.
the work that goes into that. So what I did, and actually was very helpful, was to a lot of the department heads here operate under at least advisory groups, if not actual overseeing bodies that in some instances hire the department heads. So I got the opportunity to speak to many of those boards and committees that have chairs who are more interactive with the department heads, go through the files that Jeff Ritter left behind in terms of the contracts and also any performance evaluation process that had come through the town administrator's office, and then coordinate with each of those boards and committees if they were the ones doing performance evaluations, and in many instances they were, and they were quite thorough, which I was impressed by. And so in each of the instances when I talked to the board and committee, it was just, obviously, if the performance evaluation is being done very well and thoroughly, my only request is sort of, going forward, I would really like to work on timing all of these performance evaluations so that they can be done, and then my ensuring that they're being done consistently for each department head throughout the town, whether it's through my office or if it is done by a board and committee. And so that was great. That gave me the opportunity to talk to or meet quite a few people. And then the actual development of the goals I've progressed quite a bit on. And then I will be looking to sit down with department heads and move forward on renewing the contracts and going over the goals as we discussed. And additionally, the two things that needed to be added were obviously the facilities manager, who did not exist a year ago. In this capacity, he existed otherwise, and the sustainability coordinator, who was under a different agreement before this fiscal year. And so that's sort of the leadway that leaves me here, and I would think in the next 2 weeks I should be able to hopefully move forward and move ahead with this.
Great.
Any questions from?
I think the notion also was that the board desired not just contracts, but also specific measurable goals.
Right.
That,
And so the goals with, measurable, sort of time restricted and those types of things, is I've been developing as going through this, but one of the things that I wanted to see if performance evaluations were being done in many respects, right? The qualitative and quantitative analysis that goes into that often has goal components.
Mhm.
So that was part of the valuable part of going through those that exist, and the ones that were done more comprehensively were certainly very helpful.
Based on the information you gave us in our packet, I would guess that you would have these wrapped up by the end of the month.
Yeah.
Great.
I think that's fair.
Any comments on that, Ben?
No, I think that's great. I think
You
it's
good,
really,
Tina?
No, it's great.
Next item?
That is all I have on that, so I would move to the capital update.
Please, go right ahead.
And this is again relatively verbal. I have talked I've talked multiple times now, twice with the capital subcommittee of the finance committee. Ben has accompanied me on both of those calls. And what I am currently doing is updating a 5-year document that was at one point held by Ben Sparrow in his capacity in the finance committee before moving over to the select board. And so that was very helpful to work with Ben, and I appreciate his help there. I am updating that document after speaking with department heads. Today I did sort of, with some department heads who had heavier lifts, I did, a sort of exit interview, I would call it, with all of the information they had given me to then look at what I've come up with the update before that goes public. I would just say my timeline right now is this Friday to get that to you. And hopefully this Friday represents 45 days before October 26th, which is in our capital policy, which was adopted last week. So that would be one goal, is to get it out to you by that point, but also I think that's doable based on where I am. I would just reference one thing, which is that I've updated this document with feedback from department heads and needs from boards and committees. But the one thing that is missing and will not be in this iteration of the 5-year update is anything coming from Dude Solutions data-driven. We are still waiting for the output of that, although we are hopeful that that will happen soon. And if that were to impact it greatly, that would be something I would bring to you in the future beyond Friday. My next step after that document gets to you is the prioritization, and that's going to be, that will probably come in the form of looking towards special town meeting, a prioritization of what's needed on the capital list for each department, and looking at the next available town meeting. I would mention one other thing. Finance staff met with the governance committee. I believe it was Tuesday. This week has been getting away from me, but I believe it was yesterday. And one of the governance committee members, Scott McKechnie, was asking, because he has not seen a public-facing document of capital from the town, if what I'm sort of working on here with the subcommittee and bringing to you on Friday will eventually become a public-facing document. I said that would absolutely be my hope. I think a 5-year CIP, going into a budget document is ideal as soon as possible. Making it, a sort of a draft document in the beginning for people to give feedback on, I would love to pursue. All of this will dovetail nicely with our warrant development, and I would say starting next week, I will add to your board agenda, if that's all right with the chair, beginning to have warrant updates as we approach October 26th.
Yeah. Travis, real quick back to Scott's question. I presume they have it, but maybe I shouldn't. In the event the governance committee is interested in the financial policy document, the town utilizes in collaboration with the finance committee to sort of guide ourselves financially. Do you know if they have that? And if they don't, would you share it with them?
I believe they do, but I can follow up
Okay.
and I will update the capital policy that you've all signed and voted last week
Right.
on the website. And add
That's
that
the
to
request policy.
Exactly.
Yeah. The financial policy itself has some, I know it has at least one paragraph in there about capital budgeting. It speaks to like a percentage of the total omnibus.
I think it's mostly about, like the capital expenditure fund
Right.
and the allocation within the omnibus.
As a percent of
and
the
is a
omnibus.
percentage of the
Yeah,
omnibus,
so-
Great.
Not by itself a capital policy, but I
Right.
think it's informative, and if they don't have it, they should.
Okay.
It's an important document.
And I would just draw your attention to one thing that I provided to you is a capital request form that I put in your packet and I've discussed with the Finance Committee briefly. This is the ICMA model for requests. I think it works well with the 5-year needs document that was provided and has been updated from the Collins Center from 2017-18. It's the form that I've used in Weston and Danvers. It's the form that is generally considered to be for 5-year capital requests from departments. I have not put that out to department heads and boards and committees for the future, but that's a direction I just wanted you to know that I would be going. I may also look, this is an Excel format, but may look to make that an online request format to make that easier for individuals who identify capital needs in town to make requests on the 5-year capital needs annual document.
Now I have a question about this data that you're collecting, which is, obviously, like, there's a lot here. There's a lot to wrap your arms around with in terms of policy and in terms of actual projects. But is the plan to also capture items that are not necessarily going in front of town meeting, but to also capture, grant applications and sort of that could be things that could be funded by alternative means rather than from the capital expenditure fund?
Yeah, so one thing that I did as I was preparing to update all of this before going too far was just to get a sense of how capital investments have been funded through the town. So obviously looking at the most recent town meetings, which is the 720 town meeting, at which point about $1 million was funded through the CapEx fund. And then the special town meeting from last October, the Article 4, in which about $1.8 million was funded, $300,000 from water retained earnings and the rest from CapEx. And then the other thing that I looked at in the last year essentially is what's been funded through grants. So the Green Communities grant of 173 that we discussed earlier, Complete Streets, Tech Assist, those types of things, the grant for construction behind for the Upper Charles River Rail Trail, Central Street to Charles Street, those types of things. I'm trying to compile all of that before buying equipment through grants, whether it be the police or fire, IT, quite a bit through community compact grants. I'm trying to compile all of that into one space to sort of track what we are accomplishing off of the warrant. That's for informational purpose, but I think it's valuable to see as well for residents and the community to see the amount of things that we're getting done outside of the tax levy, outside of free cash dollars. This is not, I haven't put together the comprehensive list yet. I've sort of started to pull all that together. And part of looking at what's been accomplished in the last couple town meetings is to also look ahead at the coming town meetings to see what is a reasonable sort of starting point, because while we are in the middle of COVID, I also don't want us to fall behind in terms of capital updating and kick the can down the road, so to speak. And so that's where I'm starting point. And as I said, next week, starting to begin the warrant discussions with this group. That's sort of the mindset that I'm in at the moment.
And one other question here. This is certainly something that we probably should address with the governance committee in some capacity. I've certainly brought it up in the past, is that if we look at our general bylaws about the capital improvement program, which is Article 34, Section 4 also indicates there should be a report that's generated. And it looks like it's the annual capital improvement summary. It sounds like that's kind of what we're getting to. But also, it also includes language about the finance committees making having recommendations, and so I mean it's pretty vague on what it is. But it sounds like it's something that I think we've neglected in the past, and it would be good. And it sounds like you're going in that direction, so I think it's a good thing. But probably we should get some clarity on the roles of who's doing what, because it's in the capital subcommittee sort of section of things, and I don't know, it should probably come from you. But
Yeah,
I think it's certainly something that we can collaborate on and work together.
I would say, and you can disagree, but based on our two discussions so far with the capital subcommittee since I've been here, I think there's an appetite for me to sort of report out, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so I think an annual capital improvement summary is probably an alternative description to
Right.
what I just described.
Yes, absolutely.
And I have no concerns that we can't produce that
Sure.
in a readable format that has many uses, including being a public-facing document, being able to be used internally for planning purposes.
Sure. Awesome. Okay.
Good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Tina, you good?
I have just 2 comments here. So going through this, you've identified a proposed funding source for everything that's remaining for fiscal year '21. And then looking backwards, historically, you did the same for articles that were approved at town meeting. Through the work that you're doing here with the capital improvement plan and with the committee and so on, is this leading you in a direction of developing a sort of a debt plan for the town moving forward, so that, my simple mind is looking at this and thinking, well, what if there wasn't a proposed funding source? Is that a point at which we turn to, I know our capital expenditure fund is 6 million plus, and so, looking at what's on here, it's not going to run dry by tackling these things, but are you finding you're heading in a direction of debt planning for the town in the future, in the coming years, beyond FY21? Is this
Yes.
leading you in that direction?
I would say what's been handed to me and was and continued to be sort of kept up by Ben after the Collins Center does not have anything at the moment that requires a significant amount of borrowing to be planned. I think that the idea is that needs to be added to this, and the debt modeling is not complicated. To add on the back end, what needs to be in there is sort of the prioritization list, and a lot of that is going to have to come from the facilities evaluation.
Okay.
Right, one of our bigger costs are going to come from buildings, and so once that's in there, we can start to then plan for and time out borrowings that need to happen, inside or outside the levy. Right, exempt and non-exempt borrowing are both tools that can be used and certainly help us plan ahead. But I think, looking at what was handed to me from the Collins Center right now, and given the well-funded CapEx fund, I think we can get through the coming town meeting, get some significant and important work done for the town to move us ahead, while we get sort of all of that information from the facilities evaluation, potentially do some studies that will highlight, allow us to help prioritize long-term beyond FY21.
Okay.
And then, certainly, I'm in the town of Weston, every borrowing was exempt. In the town of Danvers, no borrowing was exempt. I think, somewhere in between is probably the right call for most towns, and that's part of a long-term conversation that I think we need to be having.
Okay. And then in terms of prioritizing what's here for the remainder of FY21, are you reviewing the assumptions made to get to these items that are for FY21? I'm going to pick on Chief Cassidy here because he's sitting here. So, by example, ambulance pagers here is listed for replacement, $25,000. The assumption there comes from the priority there. The fact that it's on this list comes from the Collins Center. Is that where this data is coming from, or is this from, is there any looking back over assumptions that were made to put things on for FY21?
Right.
Or are you taking them for what they are and just moving forward and will prioritize anew with FY22 onwards?
So I would say, as of right now, specifically what you're looking at is more to give you a sense of what has been sort of being compiled. And the actual list that I'm talking about that we can get into the nitty-gritty on will be available on Friday.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that I did speak to each department head, and whether it was a Collins Center original number or not, get a sort of, what is your actual number, and is this something that needs to be done in 21, or can it be removed? The timeline still makes sense from when they were originally put on a 5-year. And I don't, since we're picking on the chief and he's in the room, he did confirm that number and his desire to have that in 21. Again, between now and Friday, I'll be looking at everything before I give you a final list.
Okay.
But what I've said to all departments, right, and what I've said to all boards and committees is I'm not filtering out any request. You'll see all of the requests that come. I will be giving a recommendation on what I think should come ahead for FY21, but I would not remove anything for you not to see the request, right? That's not the goal. I want anybody's request to be seen, but I will need to make a recommendation because there is only so much we want to probably be putting on a warrant, on the next warrant, especially in this year, but also, anything that needs to be done. We don't want to kick the can, as I said. I hate to use that term too many times, but I don't know if the chief wants to get into that, we certainly can, but I would just say, at this point, what I tried to do today with a few department heads, anybody I still had outstanding sort of questions on, was to just make sure I touched base and said, this is how it looks after our initial conversation, and this is what I'm going to be going ahead on in between now and Friday. Have a report that's going to be available to the select board and the finance committee that's going to show, here are all the requests, here's a sort of prioritization for FY21 as is lined out in the 45-day policy.
Okay.
The policy that specifies 45 days.
Yeah, right.
Yes. If you can't tell, the 45 days is a real sticking point for me. I've been watching that day for quite a while.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Just a couple of things, Travis. You mentioned you didn't foresee any major borrowing ahead. I'll just call your attention to the water treatment plant.
Absolutely.
That's a form of borrowing. I think it's under our levy. We just have to figure out the path, SRF or other, but we'll be borrowing likely for that project.
Yeah, my understanding is that, there's still more to come on that, but one of the modeling items within the water rate information that was brought forth to you would be the idea that it could be done under the water rate.
Yeah.
It could be done between that and the
It's going to be
tax levy.
tight, but I think it's doable.
Yep.
Last time I looked at that.
Absolutely.
When I look at capital planning, one of the things that's always frustrated me was there was inadequate traffic copping of capital items to their respective financial host, specifically the CPC. CPC, as we know, is a unit of government that reports to the town meeting. They have a separate chair. They receive certain kinds of requests that fit certain descriptions and certain tests. But it always appeared to me, just as my take, that we don't do a good enough job of shopping some eligible projects their way to maximize the value of that fund, which I understand today has a considerable balance in it. Your report this evening shows a little under $300,000 worth of projects potentially going that way. That's great, but when I think of CPC, I would love to think that anything parks, recreation, preservation, housing, actively get involved with that CPC, and to that extent, I think when I see traffic copping, I think that's your job, to make sure that these items get value tested against that fund, and in the event that you feel like they're a good match, escort them to the next CPC meeting and get them in. Citizens pay into a fund, and I think we should be seeing a better representation of that return on those investments. It's just my take.
To that effect, after the Blair Square Committee came
Yes.
In front of you, I believe they're in front of Frank Chamberlain tonight.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And also James Keast is in front of that group tonight on behalf of a couple projects
That's great.
that would benefit this building, which obviously has historical significance.
So real quick, you might want to talk to Kevin about putting them on that list, because right now they're not on the list, right? You don't have a Blair Square plug for the CPC.
Somewhere though.
I do not have a Blair. Okay, good point.
John, do you feel like we do enough outreach to maybe some of the, I'm thinking of like the community farm committee and some of the smaller ones, that they can be pointed to the CPC for funding?
Yeah.
Are we doing enough outreach and communication to boards and committees to let them know that CPC is an additional source for them?
That's exactly my point. I think,
Great.
there's this thing, and it's not it doesn't meet every Monday night, and it meets infrequently. I know that's their schedule, but they're a resource. And I think whenever people are thinking of community resources that affect recreation, preservation, or housing, go talk to them and let him know I'm going to go talk to them, because it's a potential source of funding that benefits our community. So I think a lot of people just don't understand that's a waypoint, and it's a good place to start with requests for funding on a lot of those instances, Tina.
their agenda tonight. So their agenda tonight includes a Parks and Rec issue that I noticed on my first day in town. They're going to clean that up, so we'll have that. And they are meeting tonight with Kevin Conley on Blair Square improvements, as we discussed last week. James Keast on Town Hall windows, as he has a couple solutions here that he thinks will stay within the framework of the historical nature and potentially the Town Hall auditorium floor. But as it's not being used, it might be a good time to make that sort of beautify that.
Could use it.
And I think one other thing to sort of point out about this is that, you know, I know there's a lot of pieces and moving parts, and there's a lot of departments and people to talk to, but I think one of the things that we should be trying to do to a certain extent is I think sometimes, you know, we don't necessarily want department heads to sort of go overboard, but we also want to make sure that they're bringing up things that are important and are coming up, to the point that Tina's trying to make about some of these, you know, some of these smaller departments and organizations within the community. They might not necessarily be thinking about things that they're doing. They might not realize that there's funding, so it's almost like we have to make sure that everybody's sort of saying, like, look, this is stuff that I want to put on the radar. Like, one of the things that I did with Sean Reese when I went through his capital is I even put some things on there like water towers. We're not planning to replace those. We don't need to replace those, but we want to make sure they're sort of on the radar, just so that, like, hey, this is a replacement cost of something like this. If it comes up, this is how much we're looking at. Just sort of to think about, you know, what does the fleet look like? What is the, you know, what are our buildings? And I think, you know, Dude Solutions is going to be able to do that with a lot of our facilities, and it'll be really good to be able to start putting those pieces in place. But I think we want to make sure that people are thinking about what's going on in their spheres, and if there are needs or if there are things, like I remember talking to the chief about little things like, you know, making sure that some of the sub-fire stations had proper heating and things like that, so that way we had, you know, if it got particularly cold, that some of the equipment wouldn't freeze. And so some of these things that might not necessarily be something that we need to spend $100,000 on, but we want to make sure we keep it on the radar, and then to that end, asking the CPC. And I mean, I know this is it's sort of a larger topic, but I just want to make sure that people aren't sort of, oh, I don't want to bring that up, or I don't know, you know, that we're kind of having these conversations and we're making sure that people are bringing up things that are important to them. And then we can sort of, you know, that, you know, they can be evaluated and filtered to a certain extent, but at least they're communicating, hey, I have a need that this could potentially be out there, and then maybe the CPC or, you know, other forms, grants, things like that, that we can have communication with, you know, the sustainability coordinator or whomever about, you know, potential opportunities if they exist.
I have one last comment and we can move on, Chair, if you would be so kind. So if you don't have a budget, you're not following the budget process. Capital, from my experience of the year and a half on the board, is tied to annual town meeting and special town meeting. So if you're out of the budget process because you don't have a budget, you are not in any process that allows your ideas as a committee member, say again, we'll pick on the community farm committee, you don't have a process by which your ideas raise to the level of a capital request. And so that, to me, would be a piece. John's talking about it, Ben's talking about it, that there's maybe some outreach, or as the capital process separates itself a little bit, perhaps, from the operating budget process, that it becomes more apparent to those that there's a place to go in the absence of an operating budget, or you know, requests that you're making related to your operating budget. You have another place to go to seek funding for ideas, initiatives, and planning.
Point out two things. One is that's why I think the request form is necessary.
Yep. Okay.
And making it a web platform is probably the way that I'll end up going. And the outreach, as Joan said off the top, I think, you know, I can't see it coming from anybody but me. If there's another solution to that, you know, we can certainly look at it. But I think that it will be quite a bit of outreach on my aspect to sort of say, you know, a board and committee, like on the liaison list that doesn't have a staff person there to represent their interests, would probably need to be contacted by me to say, here's a request form. I would say the Collins Center did represent a Blair Square amount under the header of Rail Trail Committee request, and I'm talking off the top of my head. I believe it was $400,000 in FY23. Where that information came in from, or how the Collins Center specifically got to that, I think that would be the point to say, if you're going to talk to that committee, you should be talking to other committees, and the form should be available so that somebody does have has the ability to make a request.
Okay. Any comments from our Zoom call this evening on remarks made relative to capital planning? Hearing none. Any other items under the town administrator's report?
Okay, so I believe the next will be an update from the sustainability coordinator, who should be on the
Okay, so we
line.
have something in our packet regarding some appointments. Are we deferring on that?
No, I think
I have sustainability coordinator first and then board business?
he sent it separately from the packet. It was a separate email.
Yeah, sorry. It was not available at the time of the packet. It was a separate email. I can.
All right, got it. So we will move on then. So that concludes the comments from the town administrator. Now we'll move on to the update from the sustainability coordinator, Matt Zedek. Good evening, Matt. How are you, sir?
Good, Mr. Chairman, how are you? Thanks for having me in this evening.
Pleasure.
So I'll expand on the brief overview I provided, and then happy to answer any other questions and get some input. So on the energy front, making progress on the community choice aggregation program. The town administrator and I had a good call last week with our vendor as we're finalizing the details for the updated program that will be kicking in December. We're pleased that there'll be a reduction in the rate paid by our electric customers, and it'll be a greener program. Again, we're just finalizing those details. We're also helping to facilitate through the revised aggregation plan that had been posted back in the spring. We had a recent call with the Department of Energy Resources to help move that along, and it's off to the Department of Public Utilities for their review. On the solar front, looking to we're exploring creating a little pact of some local communities to go out to bid and select some vendors to be able to help provide better pricing and services for residents and businesses in our communities, and that would pretty much be for solar, and we're also looking at heat pumps as a key service that could be through that initiative. I'll be able to provide more information in the coming weeks and through Travis on that one. On the climate change side, that's pretty much regarding two different grant opportunities. One where we participated in, the grant application went in June. That was part of the Charles River Climate Compact. The town of Natick's taking the lead on that grant. That's for $360,000. Has a 25% match from the participating communities. Our commitment is just over $5,000. Should we receive the grant, that would involve staff time. And that's a regional MVP action grant. We should be hopefully hearing hopefully some good news on that in the next week or two. And I think Travis mentioned last week that we submitted a MAPC Accelerating Climate Resiliency Municipal Grant. That went in last Monday. That was for $55,000, and that's to conduct a public tree inventory in the town of Holliston. Again, there's no match on that particular program. Travis, Tina, and Mary G. Did some nice help early on with the initial development of the grant. Ryan in particular was a good help, along with Karen and Chris chipping in. And then we had good letters of support from Jackie Weiner, Robert Weidnick, Chief Cassidy, and also from the Friends of the Holliston Trails. I really appreciated their good support there.
Matt, question for you on that program.
Please.
The public tree inventory, will that include a condition of the tree and the location of the tree, obviously?
Yes. Location, conditions, and again, it's mainly along our public streets. A good focus, it would be along the rail trail, again, trying to make sure we protect that important resource and asset for the community. Our parks, our school grounds, other municipal buildings, and our council on aging, and especially with if we get this and there's work being done around the schools, hopefully folks who are in session at that time at the schools, it'll just be a wonderful laboratory right there for our students to learn about these important resources.
What about public roadways?
Public roadways is the key focus there of the grant.
I think this would be, Ben, this was something that you were working on with the Finance Committee before you left them, which was trying to estimate the up-branching and tree removal budget for the Highway Department. There seemed to be a chronic issue of never having enough money to deal with the the maintenance of trees within the town of Holliston.
Yes.
And with this kind of inventory, it might allow us to put our hands finally around what the total project cost might be.
Potentially.
Given the condition of the various trees.
Yes.
How long will that inventory take to pull together, Matt?
So it's a 1-year grant. If we receive it, the awards supposedly will be announced in late October. The actual work by the tree specialist for doing the inventory would probably take place after the winter months, just somewhat conditional upon the weather during the winter. And in terms of how long it would take, estimate talking to one of the potential vendors is it would be between 6 and 8 weeks for doing the actual inventory, being out there. And that would again probably be next spring if we do receive the grant, or early summer.
Thanks. You can go on to your next point. Thanks, Matt.
On the waste reduction, we've been working and developing, and shortly we'll be looking for your full support for a food waste
Matt,
subscription.
Sorry, I think you skipped one under climate change.
I actually apologize. I did go out of order there. So the two grants were the MAPC Climate Resiliency Tree Inventory Grant, and the other grant that we're waiting to hear is that regional grant that we put in with the Charles River Climate Compact. That's the $360,000 one to do a stormwater modeling for all the communities in the Charles River watershed. And that would be a big help for us relative to flooding concerns, and that would also provide some assistance with our efforts to manage our dams as effectively and efficiently as possible, whether that's doing better jobs with repairs, but also looking to remove any dams that are just not needed anymore because they've outgrown their purpose and they cost us money, and they're impacting us negatively with the climate change going on. So on the waste reduction front, we're looking to have this partnership with the town of Ashland.
Sorry, Matt. Sorry, I hate to interrupt you. Wanted to find out if you were aware of a grant. I passed it along to you today, Travis. The Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities, the BRIC program, which seeks to look at impacts on local communities for hazardous mitigation affecting climate change. Have you been familiar with this program, this grant?
I was made aware of it, and I've signed up for the webinar. It's coming up in another week or so. So thanks for passing along that information.
So that'll be added to this batch of grants that you're looking at. Go ahead. Sorry.
Absolutely. Nope, that's good. Keep them coming. So with the food waste initiative, this would be building on the existing private subscription service that in our town we have over 125 households that privately subscribe with one of the few food waste collection vendors out there, Black Earth Compost. So the initiative with Ashland would be to help build on the existing program, provide a little incentive for new customers to enter the program, and it would be help reduce the cost for those households that are already participating. And an additional benefit to the town, of course, would be by removing materials that are currently being tossed out as trash. We end up saving money on the trash disposal side. So this basically would be using some existing grant funds that the town has previously secured, and they're actually designed for a purpose like this, waste reduction, and it would be building on that private subscription service that's currently in play. So looking forward to coming back to you probably, hopefully in the very near future, just to get your hopefully your final support on that one. Tina, I appreciate it. Tina, we're again coming for a site visit last month for a potential site where the food waste would go. That would be in the town of Medway. Again, the closer you can have the disposal site to the where the material is being generated, it saves you money, but it also is good for the climate. We're minimizing transportation impacts, etc. So hopefully that'll come to bear. Putting the final touches on a memorandum regarding seeking some CARES reimbursement funds related to the additional trash and recycling that's been generated, significant amounts of additional trash and recycling that the towns had to pay for due to the COVID-19 arriving in March. And we should be, I'll be finalizing those with the chief, and I'm sure he'll be coming to you with that in the near future, along with Travis's help. On the Sustainable Materials Recovery Program, this is I'm just wrapping up in terms of FY20 activities. I'm just wrapping up the paperwork for the 2 grants that we received, both for the trash cart grant and the recycling cart grant that we received, just to wrap that up. And also in June, we had submitted the grant fund. We've applied for the grant again for the next following year, and we're seeking an increase of 20% of the funds that we received last year through that same grant. And hopefully in the next month or so, we should be receiving word from the DEP about receiving that grant. I also really want to thank the Sustainable Waste Management and Recycling Committee for their help in helping to meet the grant requirements. And again, as we're trying to boost how much we receive from that grant, we'll have some more funds to do some more good initiatives. Then I just listed a couple of the ongoing town projects, where I sort of try to help add value to existing things. The Blair Square Committee and their project is really exciting. Had a nice visit down there with Ben last week to get a better sense of the site. I'm looking forward to working with the folks in the weeks ahead. 9 King Street, haven't had much activity there with what's going on, but just chipping in with that as that important project moves forward. The Green Communities Grant has already been mentioned. Chris has been doing a great job over the years leading that charge and through this latest round of the grant. So very exciting to see that we received that 4th round, and hopefully we'll work out the complete round of funding on that. And then chipping in on the solar project that will be taking place up at the old landfill on Marshall Street. So just trying to be a member of the team, chipping in on that one as well. I did list a couple of other things sort of more on the looking ahead front to zoom in on. The Marshall Street drop-off area, that's something, John, you mentioned from the get-go. You really wanted me to try to get some eyes on it and see if there's any way to enhance the services up there, and also see if we can generate a little revenue from materials that could be collected up there. So looking forward to doing that. Street lights, looking to advance the purchase and conversion. Looking to work with, I've already talked to Travis and James about that initiative, so we're looking forward to move that forward. Engagement with the schools, I listed just because it's something I had started to do before things kicked in March. I had already met up with the then superintendent, Dr. Jackson, Sue Stone, and some of the teachers and some of the students. So unfortunately that was put on hold, and of course the focus now is trying to get the schools reopened safely. But as that flushes out, I'm really looking forward to engaging with the school community again on sustainability related matters. Great resource. Textile recycling, curbside issue, that's been impacted because of the pandemic again. The inability to move product has across state lines, but more importantly internationally, whether it's to Canada or other markets, has impacted that, but hopefully that'll be kicking into gear again in the near future. Dams I listed as well. That ties in with that Charles River Climate Compact grant that we're hoping to get. As well as it having been identified through the MVP planning process last year. And then lastly, I listed water conservation. You know, that's something that's a key focus in town, ongoing issue. We can never do enough water conservation. Looking to work with DPW. They have some good information on their website in terms of indoor water conservation measures and also outdoor water conservation measures that people can put into play. But I'll also be looking for some grants and other opportunity funding sources for helping get some devices that residents can use, whether they're rain barrels, aerator faucets, and shower heads. I'd like to plug folks on their own checking out the Mass Save program. Some of these items you can get a no-cost assessment of your home relative to energy efficiency and other conservation-related matters. And there are some opportunities there to get some no-cost devices, but also just wanted to throw this one out there. There's a $125 rebate available for residents if they have an old refrigerator or freezer that they may be looking to move on. Again, those are, especially the older ones, are incredibly inefficient and energy suckers, absorb orders. And again, this is they've had different rebates over the years for these particular items, but at the $125 rebate, they'll come and take it away. That's only in play until the end of October. So in particular, that's about the highest rebate I've seen for that program. And then just lastly, on the water conservation, I just wanted to mention common sense is really comes into play, especially for us older folks. I know it's a challenge for me. I've got a 15-year-old. I'm just trying to ask him to try to reduce his time in the shower by maybe 30 seconds or 1 minute every time. It's just amazing how with just a little bit of tweaks we can try to do in some of our daily habits, when we think about it, can end up making a very important difference, and especially in the town of Holliston where water is so precious, and the town's taking so many steps both to improve the infrastructure for delivering the water, but also with the upcoming water treatment plant. It's important that we all take as many steps as possible to support those measures. So happy to answer any other questions or other input.
Matt, Ben, any questions for Matt?
Yeah, a couple things. First, I want to say thank you for these things that you're doing. I think there's some important initiatives that you're doing on behalf of the town and its residents, and I think this type of work is important. And I was glad to meet you the other day, and it was a nice conversation that we had. And so I really appreciate you taking some time to chat with me. So a couple things. The first is that do you when you were searching out particular grants or initiatives, are you looking to try to reach goals for these particular areas, or are you just kind of sort of seeing what's out there in terms of grants and opportunities for the town?
Both.
Okay.
So we have a particular need, whether it's going to be something specific at Blair Square, for instance. Obviously, that's going to be a targeted grant need that we would be going after, whether it's for some solar panels for the structure that's done, or rain barrels if we're going to be trying to make sure we have some water source there, or at least a small water source to help with watering things. I know that's in general a challenge. We oftentimes have things, trees or flowers donated and planted, but a lot of times the making sure those are taken care of can be a challenge, so we just want to think those things through that way. So on the other hand, if there are grant opportunities out there, we don't see a specific need that we previously identified in town, absolutely want to think it through. Just because we haven't thought about it before doesn't mean it's not necessarily a good idea, but we definitely are trying to prioritize grant opportunities for those needs that we've identified. For instance, streetlight conversion, or solar initiatives in the town, and go from there. Unfortunately, some of these grant opportunities that have been out there that people know about are no longer in play, such as the Solarize Massachusetts program that had been run through the DOER. That concluded last year. They did have a number of municipalities participate through that program, but unfortunately they stopped that grant program as the state shifts their resources elsewhere.
Okay. One other thing is maybe we can work together offline, but I'd like to see maybe if we could put together like a report on what grants you have out there, what's come in, what value, where they are in the process and things like that, so we can just have like a quick, concise synopsis, like just an Excel spreadsheet that just lists out everything and status and things like that, so we can kind of see how we're doing and and what's ongoing. And then the last thing is that we talked about it too the other day too, but I think one of the things that we should really be looking towards is to try to put things like this into focus on either Town of Holliston or a blog post on Holliston Reporter or something like that, to sort of talk about some of these sustainable initiatives that we're undergoing. I think it's really important that we reach out to residents, because we can do a lot, but especially if there's initiatives that residents can participate in, we want to make sure that they're aware of them and that they have access to in one place to be able to find how to access the information that they need or apply for any particular rebates and such.
Have you talked to IT about that, or Chris Mayo about that? About like a dedicated site on the website or anything like that, a dedicated page, that is?
Yes, he's very supportive. He has been helpful in developing the sustainability page to date, and just need to put some more time into it.
Okay.
And Chris has been a big help with that.
Awesome.
You good?
I'm all set. Thank you.
Tina?
Yeah, a couple real quick things. Do you need anything to clear the way to use existing funds for the initiative to expand on the subscription program for composting? So you mentioned that there's grant money, that's funds are available. Do you need anything to clear the way to use those funds, or are you all set when the green light's on and you're ready to go?
I'll probably come back to the board. I'm not sure if it's officially needed, but it's a good way to do it, because it's come back to the board to gain your support for using some of those funds for this to incentivize the food waste program.
Okay.
I don't believe it's needed based on the actual grant requirements, but I still think it's advisable just to show that you're supportive of it, and you'll also know that we're using those grant funds for the exact type of purpose that we originally received the grant, took the time and effort to go for the grant and received it in the past. So,
Okay.
not needed, I think, a
Okay.
particular one, but it would be helpful.
Okay. Do you see changes coming, and are you planning on changes to the Sustainable Waste and Recycling Committee? You've worked with them, you alluded to working with them. Do you see changes to their charge, to their mission, to anything about the profile that this board needs to be aware of? Are you going to come back to us with any possible changes to that committee?
Have talked about it a little.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to flesh out the conversation a little bit more
Okay.
before coming back to the board, but I think it would be advisable to expand the duties of that particular board, so we can actually make it a little more comprehensive outside of just the solid waste and recycling field. So
Okay.
I know there's been overlap with some of the folks who also enjoy focusing on the sustainability and climate resilient type initiatives. So it's a good point, and I think we should get that fleshed out very soon. I look forward to talking to Travis about that as well.
Okay, and then what streetlights are next up for replacement in your mind? So the Green Communities Grant is going to target Pinecrest, lights up there, both interior and exterior, if I've got that right. Where do you see us going next with town light, street light replacements?
Well, this has been mentioned pretty constantly since coming on board, and even beforehand, the need to convert our our main street lights from the high pressure sodium to the LEDs. It's a longer, more complicated process because we don't own the street lights. So that would be the first stage of doing the due diligence, doing a full assessment of an audit of where the street lights are. One would tend to think that our utility company would have that information readily available, and yet you talk to communities and organizations that have helped facilitate streetlight conversions in the past, and they emphasize you want to do your own audit of where the streetlights are. If you're purchasing them, you just don't want to rely on the utility. So that's one of the key stages along the way. But unfortunately, the main state program that supported the streetlight conversion through the MAPC, just like the Solarize program, ended last year after being in play for several years. So that particular grant program is not out there through the MAPC. They are providing some technical support on how we should proceed. And I also want to look at some other, if there's any other grant fundings that we might be able to, grant funds or other funding sources we might be able to secure that'll help us purchase the lights and move towards the converted LEDs.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Matt, just a couple of things. I think you've been with us for about 7 months. Is that roughly the case? So I recognize in a relatively short amount of time you had to embrace a new job opportunity, a job description, and a fairly large agenda of items that the town can embrace for sustainability planning and action. I will tell you that one of the things that I will become increasingly impatient with will be the lack of progress on initiatives. I think it's good to talk about plans and ideas that benefit the sustainable infrastructure and needs of Holliston. I think it's better to act on them. So to that end, my remarks are similar to what Ben brought in. This project overview is a great start. I would strongly recommend that you work with our town administrator to build in some projected goals and timelines for these initiatives. You spoke to them tonight. I can assure you tomorrow night I won't remember those things. But if we can have a project overview that tracks the work that you're doing and gives us a sense of when we can expect some achievable outcomes, that would give me a sense that Holliston is on the right track to not just talking about sustainability policy, but actually coming through with it, initiating programs, getting grants, and building a better sustainable portfolio. So I strongly encourage you to build a model that can both reflect not just the statement of the goal or the project, but also some measurable timelines and actions that we can then come back to and say, okay, we expected this to be done by December 1st, it's now January 1st, what's going on? You've got, on the face of this report this evening, you've got about a dozen or two items, and there's a lot going on in your world, and I think we need to be tracking these things so that you don't overstretch yourself, but we set your expectation of what you can achieve reasonably within a given year or so. Okay?
Yeah, I appreciate those good comments, Mr. Chairman. In fact, in part because 3 of the grant opportunities that we've gone after in the last several months we still don't know if we've received them. It'll be helpful. 2 of them we should know in the very near future, and it'll help determine where some of my activities will be going forward, and it will help with that as well. And then the 3rd grant that we just applied for, we should hear in the next 6 or 8 weeks. And again, whether we get that or not, that'll help determine where some of my time goes. But good points, and looking forward to working with the town administrator in just that fashion.
Travis, I hope.
So
excuse me 1 second, Matt. I think you get the gist. He needs some help bringing this into more of an action plan. That when he comes before us, say in 2 months or so, we've got a good benchmark of expectation. What are some of the stumbling blocks? He's received a grant. When can we expect to deploy it? So on and so forth. But we need a little bit more behind this sustainability project overview than what we see.
Okay. Yeah, we can certainly change the format, and I'll work with Matt on that.
It's bringing onto paper what Matt expressed tonight, so that when he comes before us in a few months, we can then check it back and keep moving in that direction. Because a big part of this job, and I think you were with us when we created it, is return on investment. We want to see that through sustainability practices, the town is actually receiving some kind of benefit in the form of savings somewhere that can be enumerated or in some way measured. And that's certainly the case when you start to see the results in some of these projects. So let's get there.
Yep.
Anything else tonight, Matt?
We do it.
All right, any other questions? Anybody questions from our Zoom call participants this evening on our Sustainability Coordinator's update? Hearing none, we will move on. Matt, have a great night. We look forward to another update. We'll let you know when that is, probably a couple of months out, and complete with some updates on how that information will come to us. Sound good?
That's good. And then, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'd maybe through the town administrator come back to you at maybe your next meeting to get your support for that food waste initiative, so we can get that one going with the town of Ashland. And then, again, information through Chief Cassidy about the CARES reimbursement for the extra solid waste and recycling costs. And that should be there next week as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thank you. That's great.
Thanks,
Thank
Matt.
you very much.
Have a great night, Matt.
Bye.
All right. Following the update from the Sustainability Coordinator, we have some board business. Minutes of August 3rd, 2020. Minutes of August 17th, 2020. Has the board had a chance to review those? Any comments? Any motions that anybody would like to make relative to those two board?
I'll make a
Minutes.
motion to approve the minutes of August 3rd and of August 17th.
I just want to confirm one thing with the practice. So with Jeff, we were getting the minutes in the agenda packet. And Peg is very kindly sending them out a couple days. My assumption here is that what I see from Peg, the last meeting minutes attached are the final copy. So they're not in the agenda packet tonight, but what she sent out last would be the final.
That's correct. So I'm
Okay.
not
Yep.
changing Peg's minutes. What I can do
Okay.
is so she's sending them out so you have the most time
Yep.
to review them. But
Yep.
I can reattach them when I
No.
send you a packet so that you sort of have it all together if that's
I'd like that.
Oh, you would like that? Okay.
Sure.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all in one place then.
Okay.
All right.
That way down the road, if you're looking for meeting minutes from a certain time frame, you just go back to his BOS packet from that date. It's in there. You know, you don't have to go. Good for you?
Sounds good.
That'd be great. Do we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 3rd and August 17th?
I already made that motion.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on, appointment to the stipend subcommittee. Mr. Ahern, we have a candidate.
We do, and this would be the fifth and final. Mr. Thomas Dumas of 157 Washington Street has expressed his interest.
Winter Street.
I'm sorry?
Winter Street.
I'm sorry, Winter
157
Street. What did I? Yeah, 157 Winter Street. Resident of Holliston since 1971. He's given some of his background to you and gave me the answers to the questions I was looking for. And if there's any questions here, otherwise, this gentleman would be the fifth and final member of the subcommittee. And I will let you know, since last week, with your two seatings, there is now a quorum of that group. I have initiated the setting up of an initial meeting, which I believe will be held Thursday evening, September 24th. And if they have a fifth member, then they'll be all the better.
I move to accept Tom Dumas as the fifth member of the stipend committee.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
You have a second.
Any questions on the motion? All those in favor of appointing Mr. Dumas to the stipend committee say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, that carries.
Thank you, Mr. Dumas, for submitting your interest
Absolutely.
to serve.
That's
It's a
right.
good-
Thank you.
It'll be a good group.
We have appointments of EMTs. Is that correct? Two of them?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Chief, would you like to speak to that? Is
Well, I
there
think
a
we
question?
just,
Okay.
we've
Sure.
got the information. We can move in here. We've got Ms. Amber Hebb of Ashland and a Robert Hanson of Milford. These would be on-call, both of them on-call, emergency medical technicians of the Holliston Fire Department.
I'll make a motion to appoint Amber Hebb and Robert Hanson as on-call emergency medical technicians for the fire department.
Second, with a question for Chief Cassidy. Are they COVID, where one has experience working as an EMT for private ambulance service prior to, well, up to this point, are they COVID tested? Is that a requirement? Is that?
It has not been.
Okay, all right. I second that.
All those in favor say aye for the appointments of Ms. Hebb and Mr. Henson.
Aye.
Aye. Good on that, Travis?
Yeah.
All right. Any other business this evening? Mr. Sparrow,
I have no other business.
Ms. Hyde.
I only want to update the board briefly from the MWRC planning meeting that myself as vice chair and the chair and a third member of the executive board had on Friday. Our legislative aide, Leah Robbins, updated the board to say there's going to be a regional traffic study sponsored by, I think it's MAPC or the Worcester equivalent of MAPC, looking at the impact of truck traffic in our region. She's going to get back with a lot more information. She was aware of the Lowland Industrial Park forum that we'd had, 2 weeks ago?
She did reach out to me as well, and I'll be speaking with her in a week or so.
Okay. So I don't have a lot of information except to, update the board to say that there are regional efforts underway to study the impact of commercial and industrial traffic in our region. And that through the MWRC, our next couple meetings, September, October, probably into November, we'll be looking at the future in terms of what happens when the executive orders expire and how our community is going to respond with their experiences so far with remote participation.
Sure.
And is there going to be, can we look to get some training for chairs in the future? If remote participation is going to live beyond these executive orders, can there be training for individuals on how to manage sort of that public comment piece, the moving target that is public comment during something like a Zoom meeting? So I hope to be able to update the board after one of our upcoming meetings on maybe some training or maybe some anticipated, what's the future going to look like?
Doesn't something tell you that your children's generation will have no problem doing that?
Well, you
Yeah,
say
use of
that, and
technology
no,
and
I have to say that with college students orienting right now, they're not loving the Zoom interaction thing. It is hard for them as well to negotiate dynamic conversation.
That's true.
and
Maybe after all the
free flow.
distance learning, they'll hate this.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's a struggle for just about everybody. I don't know that the digital native is any better equipped than the people
enough.
like us, the non-natives.
Great
What are
feedback.
you, by the way, Travis? Are you a digital native? I know
Yeah.
Christian is.
All I know is I'm a millennial.
Oh, good Lord.
All right.
Oh,
Anything
that was
else?
not on his application.
Anything else?
No.
For folks at home, just one item. This coming Tuesday, I think, we are meeting with our colleagues at MassDOT. This is a follow-up from this board's plans to prioritize state roadway construction projects and other mitigation issues, and also involving traffic issues that we've heard from at Lowland Industrial Park. We hope to not only establish a personal relationship with these stakeholders, but also lay the groundwork for more of an involved, sustainable relationship that likely will be with us for some time. We are looking forward to this meeting for a lot of reasons. I want to let folks know that I do receive emails from the public through my town email. I presume, Ben, you get them. Tina, you must get them. We do hear from them, and I will speak to the ones I've gotten recently on 555 Hoppingbrook. I'm very, very aware of what is going on. This board has made public comments before that we are monitoring that project with extreme interest. We're allowing the various boards and committees within town of Holliston to conduct their business, and at some point that work will come before us. Through the town administrator, we're monitoring, not only monitoring, but we're going to start collaborating and coordinating our town's response to that project. Folks up on South Street who have emailed us, I know I owe you a couple of emails. I wanted you to specifically know the board has demonstrated a commitment to understanding the citizens' concerns and interest in traffic issues in neighborhoods. We are not ignoring you. We are monitoring, and we will execute a plan when the time comes. We ask for your continued patience, but most of all, your continued communication. Please keep talking to us. Please send your emails. Please send your pictures. It's information that helps us make good decisions, and I think you'll see that over time that will bear fruit. It's important that we do things the right way with some planning and smart thinking, and most of all with our through collaboration and coordination with folks like MassDOT. So the time will come, but it may take a while, as it will with Lowland or any other traffic impact. These things tend to drag on, and I can certainly understand residents' impatience with it. I really can. But if you bear with us, you have partners here. We work for you, and we want to make sure that we do it right. So with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Folks, have a great evening. We'll see you next week. Good night.